So today we're gonna have another talk about steamos, cause Jay's Two Cents has released a video, which has led to a lot of speculation. So basically what happened was Jay's Two Cents was trying out some Linux benchmarking, and his results. I'm going to be very clear with you because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, maybe these results have to do with blah 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 blah." They don't. They are actually just bugged, and there is no working around that. There was no bullshit. Linux has such bad performance. It's not true. Believe me, because I have done my own tests on Windows versus Linux. I've done it on multiple graphics cards, multiple computers. You can go watch actual people who are reviewed, and the reviewers would say that his results were off because what happens is kind of weird, right? So tech tubers have a very specialized skill set, which is kind of concerning. So they can benchmark shit all day, every day, but only if they use Windows. If you throw Linux at them, there's everything goes out the window. They might as well have never touched a computer before in their lives. You know what I mean? And that can be true because Jay said that he was kind of a noob, but I didn't get it because he benchmarks shit for a living. That's like half his job. And so I'm like, why did you forget to perhaps check other reviews to make sure that your results are correct and there isn't a bug in your system? Because that brings me to the topic of this video, which is fucking SteamOS again. So the thing about SteamOS and why I brought up Jay's 2 cents is because people ask, well, why did he go with Bazite? Why didn't he choose a distro like Linux Mint or something? And while I have my own qualms with Linux Mint, particularly in gaming, I wouldn't use it for gaming benchmarks myself. I did notice that people were saying that he should use a different distro, right? And what I think happened was a lot of YouTubers are talking about SteamOS, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we need SteamOS, right?" So people were saying, well, SteamOS only works on the handhelds right now. Maybe there will be a machine it can run on. Linus Tech Tips got their own machine with SteamOS running on it because it technically supports RDNA 2 and anything better than that, as well as like Ryzen APUs. But otherwise, it's for a very limited set of devices, and Valve says it on their page is we don't test this shit on other devices. Good luck with it. You're on your own. So people were saying, well, we want something like SteamOS that works like SteamOS, but it can be used on generic desktops. And that's kind of where the misnomer lies, because I'm wondering why people want SteamOS so badly, and I think I figured out the reason. It's because they're gonna watch a video like Jay's 2 cents, and they're gonna say, "Oh, see, this is why we need SteamOS because this OS is buggy and it fucked everything up," fucked up his results. So if we had SteamOS, Valve would make it so that the OS works perfectly out of the box on every device known to man, and it'll just work, right? And that's where there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that goes on with SteamOS because people don't realize they don't treat a Steam Deck like something like a Mac. Like with a Mac, your software always works because it is made for that device by Apple in a very limited range of devices. When you get into Hackintoshing, fucking anything can go wrong. Luckily, Hackintoshing is going away in the next few years, so they can go fuck themselves. But you have to treat a Steam Deck or other SteamOS handheld more like a specialized device rather than a generic computer. Now, obviously, with the Steam Deck, you can install whatever the fuck distro you want. I love that about it. I think that's a great feature. Because you can install another non-immutable distro. You can do whatever the fuck you want to it. You can use it like a desktop computer. Fucking fantastic. But the thing is, the operating system it ships with was designed to be run on a Steam Deck and nothing else, basically, other than like the Lenovo Legion Go or Asus, whatever the fuck they got in the pipeline, uh, or the ROG Ally, whatever. It's made for these handheld devices, and you can tell by the way the software works that it's obviously made to be used on a handheld and not a full-fledged desktop computer with all the bells and whistles and utilities you would expect out of a desktop computer. You can install a lot of those, but stuff like printing is always going to be a hassle. Um, it doesn't make it particularly easy to run alternative software other than like using DistroBox or something. Maybe you can install Brew on there. That would be a good idea. If you've ever used Bazzite, it's actually kind of interesting how they do their package management because I was only required to install, I think, two packages through RPM OS tree, and that was my printer driver because I had a Brother BR laser printer, so I was able to use that package, and then I needed a VPN client for iVPN because OpenVPN doesn't really work too well when you need to hop servers a lot. It's kind of a pain in the ass. But anyways, Jay's 2 cents ran into a similar problem I saw on somebody else's computer, which was he had a newer AMD graphics card and he ran usually vanilla Arch, and he decided to switch to CachyOS. And I said, "Oh yeah, CachyOS is cool. It runs great on my 3090. I think I've run it on my 6900 XT. It's great, great distro. It works for me. Works out of the box. It's really cool." He said that his performance under CachyOS was dog shit compared to Vanilla Arch, and that led me to believe that there was some bug in CachyOS or in his install that caused this. It could be anything. Who the fuck knows? And that's kind of why I don't give people a blanket run Linux, install Linux, nuke your Windows install, because I don't know what the fuck's gonna go wrong. It could be fucking anything. And you have to get people into this habit of if it doesn't work, you can distro hop, and you need to learn about these other distros just in case the one that you're using doesn't work. Like I had a problem on Mint. I was playing World of Warcraft and my fucking screen would like freeze every few seconds until I logged out and logged back in. There was some sort of memory leak or something. I don't fucking know what it was, but it was causing my screen to freeze a lot in game. And so I just distro hopped to something else because Cinnamon has never really been my favorite DE. I find it kind of unpolished, kind of sort of sketchy feeling. You know what I mean? You kind of get that vibe from software where you're like, this doesn't seem super, super stable. You know what I mean? And you just kind of expect bugs to happen. It's like what happens if you use the Cosmic Alpha. You're like, I can probably break this shit in 10 minutes. And by the way, I have done that. I like catastrophically broke Alpha 7 in seriously about 10 minutes. It was disgusting. But so I just hopped to another distro, and what I found was, okay, well, I'm having problems with these specific distros, and by the way, these are all Debian based or they're all Ubuntu based, so maybe I need to switch to something else that's Arch based, and that usually works. And then, you can go down the list of different distros to try. And that's something I just did on this little iMac over here. I haven't recorded it yet, but I installed Endeavor OS i3 on that Mac, and I was like, maybe I'm gonna run into Debian issues with dpackage and all that. I noticed it was kind of hanging, but I didn't really give it enough time to boot into Debian, so I'm gonna probably throw FreeBSD on that in a bit, maybe OpenBSD, because it seems like it's got good Linux support, and luckily for these not generic but computers which basically just have a few USB ports and an Ethernet port, they usually run Linux pretty fine as well as FreeBSD, so I'm gonna give that a shot. But anyways, I wanted to talk a bit about why SteamOS may not be the magic bullet people think it is, and this is all kind of a roundabout way to get back to that. What really happened is I lost my train of thought and I just went off on a tangent, but that is why you subscribe to this channel. So, anyways, what's gonna happen though, and the reason why I say that the Steam Deck is a specialized device is if SteamOS releases generically, you may run into these issues that other people are having with like Bazzite or CachyOS because these distros work on a lot of people's hardware, and yours happen to slip through the cracks. So that's the difference. This is why I say there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in SteamOS, is because people see that it works really well on the Steam Deck and they assume it's like Windows, which is made to just run on anything. Any computer can ship with Windows. Not every computer can ship with Linux. You know, you can try, but your performance and your bugs and whatever, those may vary. you know? And that's something that people don't quite get about the free software version versus the proprietary software version is Windows will probably work on any bit of hardware because they're all designed to run Windows. If you run Linux on any device, it really just depends on how lucky you are. Because like my computer, even I built this thing with the sole purpose of running Linux on it, and I still run into issues sometimes, especially with this NVIDIA card. It's been such a pain, but I did get it mostly working now. I just need to like experiment more with other distros and probably do some testing for other people, but I'll get into that later. So, yeah, what's cool about NixOS is I can fucking wipe my drive and I can be back up and running in a few minutes. It's insane. I love that about NixOS where everything's defined in like a single config file. That's so cool. But anyways, like so we're dealing with this with the SteamOS thing, and now somebody has actually tried Bazite, but I was surprised that he only used Bazite and he didn't then one go check to see that he wasn't having any bugs, but two that his he didn't think to use another distro. Hey, maybe Bazai doesn't work. Maybe I need to use Fedora. Even though it's based on Fedora, who the fuck knows? Like, CashOS may have problems that Arch Linux may not, or Arch Linux may have problems that Garuda doesn't for whatever reason. Just there's a lot of under the hood kind of stuff that goes on with distributions that aren't apparent to the end user. That's why I'm not a huge fan of like distro reviews because they usually boil down to this is what the desktop looks like, this is the package manager, here's some like apps that came pre-installed with it. That's basically what a distro review is. And I'm not really a huge fan of those kind of videos because I fucking know that. Like, if you tell me that your package manager is DNF and you use RPMs, like, yeah, I can read that on the fucking website. Thank you very much. Like, I don't need you to like, especially if that's the only things you're gonna talk about. It would help if it was stuff that it wasn't immediately apparent, you know. But yeah, I don't think SteamOS is the magic bullet people think it is, because Valve very wisely has not opened up their OS to generic use, and I don't think it would work that well if they did. People would start running into bugs. They would be like, "Hey, Valve, can you fix this? Can you fix that?" And it's like, "Oh, we don't own that hardware. We can't really we're gonna have to rely on the community to make these patches, and that's really where things are gonna go off. Not gonna go so well. You know, it's gonna be a problem where people are asking for a perfect distribution, and they think Valve is the only one that can provide that perfect distribution. Valve has done a lot of good work, but they are also very specialized. They aren't going to make like the next competitor to Ubuntu or whatever, They're making another Arch Linux fork, basically, and that's what you get, you know. So I think Jay's 2 cents ended up getting kind of misled into installing Bazite because he had this. I'm pretty sure he had this mentality that he needed SteamOS, and if he couldn't get SteamOS, he needed something like SteamOS. And that's kind of a bad way to go about trying Linux. I really wish that people's first experience wasn't not only SteamOS, but really like an immutable distro in general. Like I wouldn't throw NixOS or uBlue at somebody right at the beginning. I would expect them to get to learn their operating system first, especially because contrary to popular belief, an immutable distribution does not actually make your life easier. It actually makes your life significantly harder because you are not able to run packages natively. You will have to either install them in a container like a Flatpak or a Brew, or you will have to use something like DistroBox. And that gets to be a hassle for people more than it is a benefit when they're just getting into Linux and they want to try out all these new things, and people are telling them about all these cool things you can do. I'm sure that gamers will say that they don't give a shit about that, and that's fine if all you do is use your fucking computer to play video games. Uh, I personally do not, and I don't know many people that do. Like, pretty much, so actually, speaking of people like that, I did meet I mean, I've known him for a while, but he's a friend of a friend, and he built his first gaming PC, and he was so excited. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get to play all these PC games," and I sent him like a whole list of fucking third-party Windows software to make his computer usable. So he could like mod his games and view text files and stuff and configure things. And I was like, oh yeah, you need Notepad plus plus, you need No Max Image Lounge, you need a better web browser, you need 7-zip and all that other shit. And I don't know if he took any of it to heart, but I did notice that I took him to a computer club meeting because my friend brought him. I had a party to go to afterward, and he was checking his clock about 45 minutes in, and I said, "You can't be bored already, are you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm a bit bored." I'm like, "Yeah, this vintage computer thing is not quite as interesting as like modern gaming. I mostly talk about like accessibility stuff for Linux with people, because obviously people will still use modern computers, but their main focus is retro computers, and that's never really been something I've been into. I'm more about getting modern stuff to work on old hardware, really, extending the life of e-waste, reduce, reuse, recycle, and all that. Anyways, that was a very, very roundabout way of saying I don't think SteamOS is what people think it is. It's not this silver bullet that's gonna fix all of Linux's issues. That can't be done, really, and you will find that out as soon as you actually start using Linux. That these distributions aren't buggy on purpose, and Valve will not magically make that better. What they will do is they will make specialized hardware able to run Linux very well, but it won't suddenly make your desktop a Linux desktop. And that's kind of where we're at. So I'm kind of pissed off a bit at Jay's 2 cents because he shouldn't have thrown away his testing methodology just because there was a new operating system involved. That kind of made no sense to me. And being a noob is not an excuse for refusing to learn, basically. And I get it. He's got a job. He's got limited time. But when you make content about this, that's part of your job. And part of your job is to accurately and represent not only the issues you're having, but how you solve them. Because this is obviously a super easy fix. Just fucking uninstall Bazite and install some other distro like CachyOS. That would have been the easy solution. And it probably would have worked just fine, and he would have been fine. But can't do any testing because big Windows user. Just can't do it. So I'm going to when people start asking what their first distros to be, I might tell them like they need to be ready to hop to a different distribution if things don't work out, because I've experienced way too many issues with people switching to Linux to confidently recommend they just dive right into exactly what I say they need to do. Because I have like a step by step process in this shit. I don't rely on a single distro when I'm refurbishing computers. I will throw a whole slew of them at it until I find one that works correctly. And that's what I did with this iMac. Is I tried Wayland and it almost worked, but I had trouble recovering from sleep and all that. So I ended up trying another Wayland, and then I tried i3 because I needed something lighter weight, anyways. And it ended up being like a Endeavor OS i3 for now, and I'll probably end up switching that later, anyways. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think we need to revise our recommendations a bit. Bazite's cool. I think it'll probably work for most people, but especially for tech tuber setups where they're not they're not really designed with Linux in mind. Like, I mean, I had to make sure that all my peripherals were Linux compatible and all that. I put in the work. Basically, when I switched to Linux, I said I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to make it work for me. But a lot of people aren't going to do that, and that's a series of questions you may want to ask people before you get them started. Is how much pain are you willing to deal with? Are you willing to troubleshoot issues? Because SteamOS isn't going to fix that. Once you get SteamOS on generic hardware, it's going to have the same problems as any other distro, and people are going to say Linux sucks. Basically, how it's going to work. They're going to like parrot what Jay's 2 cents said for all intents and purposes. And I don't want that to happen. I want to give people realistic expectations. I want them to know what they're getting into, you know? So that's just me, though. I'll see you guys later. Bye.